Alright, let's see here. Alright, let's try eBay. Oh, come on. Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Today's video is going to be our second look at a watch book, and it's called A Journey in Time, The Remarkable History of Seiko. Now, if you couldn't tell by the intro already, it's really hard to find a physical copy of this book, but it is pretty easy to find a PDF version. Now, after reading this book, I think to say that Seiko's history is remarkable is pretty accurate. There's a lot that Seiko has accomplished in the past, and I guarantee you that after you read this book, you yourself will want to buy a Seiko. So without further ado, let's begin the review. Alright, so because this book is only available in PDF, I have it here on my iPad, and you can see that the book is broken down into 3 columns per page. And because of that, even though this book is only about 115 pages long, it actually will take a while for you to finish. I think for me, it took around a week to finish, and I was reading it for maybe about half hour a day. Now, this book starts off by talking about Seiko's early history as a clockmaker and pocket watch producer in the late 19th and early 20th century. There's a lot of great pictures of vintage timepieces, and it's really interesting to see how the Japanese quickly refined their production process to compete with the Swiss. The next section is when Seiko directly starts taking on the Swiss companies by competing in chronometer competitions and releasing higher quality watches like Grand Seiko and King Seiko. Finally, we end off with an in-depth look at Seiko's innovations in quartz technology, as well as their kinetic movements and spring drive. Now, after reading this book, there are a few parts that I want to share with you guys. So the first thing I want to note is that Seiko anticipated that their Grand Seiko and Creator lineup of watches would take a while to get accepted in the international market. And considering that Grand Seiko just got accepted just in the past few years or so, and Creator is still on its way, I think they hit the mark pretty spot on. And another aspect of Seiko watches that's really been grabbing the attention of enthusiasts is the fact that a lot of their watches are beginning to increase in price. But we can see here that it's always been their plan to be able to sell Seiko watches for over $1,000 in the international market. The next notable thing about this book is that it talks a lot about Seiko's kinetic movement. Now honestly, I'm still not that good at explaining how a kinetic movement works, other than it's kind of the combination of quartz technology with mechanical technology. But what I can tell you is that this book pins the kinetic movement as revolutionary and the next step forward following quartz technology. But we can see that in today's market, quartz watches are still very popular, and Seiko has pretty much abandoned the kinetic movement. Another lineup of watches you'll read about a lot in this book is Grand Seiko, and it's really interesting to see how they had so much belief in this brand and how that's kind of carried it over so that Grand Seiko is pretty much the flagship brand of Seiko today. And finally, it should be no surprise that this book spends a lot of time talking about the day that changed the history of time, aka the introduction of the world's first quartz watch and the quartz revolution in general. So overall, I think this book is pretty comprehensive when it comes to the history of Seiko, and it's really got to make you appreciate all the craftsmanship that goes into all the watches that they produce. There's also plenty of pictures throughout the book, which I think really helps to illustrate the history of this company. And of course, the best thing of all is that this book is completely free. You can easily find a PDF version just using Google search. Now, normally I wouldn't really promote free PDF versions of books just because I feel like the author deserves to get a cut of some revenue. But in the case of this book, there's really no way you can find it in a physical form. You can only find it in the digital form. Now, onto the cons of this book. So this was published back in 2003, which means all the information and all the history and developments from 2003 to 2021 are not included in this book, so you have to look online for things like that. Another issue I had was that I felt like sometimes it got a little bit too technical, especially when they were explaining quartz and kinetic watches. Now, some people might actually like how it got really into the details, but for me, I feel like just a quick summary would have sufficed. And finally, I feel like this book just didn't go into enough depth about the different lineups of watches, such as King Seiko or the Lord Marvel series. They definitely talk about Grand Seiko a lot, but I really wish they talk about all the lineups of watches because that was something I was personally interested in. Now, thankfully, there's a lot of resources online if you want to learn more about different Seiko models. So my first shout out will be to the seikoguide.com for all of his articles he's published, as well as his backlog of all the catalogs that Seiko has released. Also a shout out to the grandseikoguide.com. He has a lot of different articles about Grand Seiko and just vintage Seikos in general, and you can also buy Grand Seikos from his website. And of course, the Grand Seiko website itself has a history section where you can see all of the milestones that the brand has achieved so far. So anyways, that's my review of the book, A Journey in Time, The Remarkable History of Seiko. And I can almost guarantee that after you read this book, you're going to want to go out and buy a Seiko yourselves. And that's actually what I did. I bought a Seiko pocket watch just after I read this book, and I'll do a review on it probably later in the month. And if you do end up reading this book, let me know what your thoughts are in the comment section below. So anyways, thank you guys for watching. Hope you enjoyed the video. And as always, I'll see you guys next time.